Welcome to another episode of Houston Art Tribe. I'm Kay Sarver, and I'm here today with Nell Gottlieb and her studio, and I've been looking so forward to this. Mainly, I think it's been what you've done in just recent couple years. And I mean, the only other thing I can think of that I might have seen before then was your found plates and built plates, I believe you call it.
I found plates that have decals, fired-on decals with them, and I also have, handmade porcelain platters.
Oh yeah. They seem to tell stories, and with the found plates, did you put some of those images on top of?
Oh, yes. they all have images. They all tell a story.
Yeah.
And they're family images, and then there are also some images that I find in archives.
Yeah. They're strong and powerful, and it's obvious they led you to this, what you're doing now. But there was one other thing that I saw on your website, and I hadn't seen it live, but it was the Jim Crow chocolate box.
They're over there.
Oh, they are? Okay. Because, boy, if that didn't... Are those ceramic?
They're ceramic, and I've also made them in chocolate and fat. What would you eat? What would you spit out?
Oh my gosh, very good. So symbolic. I kept imagining just trying to chew on something that hard too, and so I thought it was just full of story there, and even each piece you named.
It's all about the narrative.
It definitely is. No, that was a strong one. But I'm most excited to talk to you about, and which I think you just came back from Alabama. Talk about this project that you've been working on.
Well, this project has a lot of different aspects to it. So part of it is community placemaking. We started a nonprofit called Fine Arts and Culture, and we have a board. And that started because I was given our family former cotton plantation house. I inherited it last year.
Yes.
And I wanted to pass it back to the community. And so that's what we're doing. But first we're stabilizing the house, and we're inviting both the black and white descendants of the place to come together, and that this is their house.
Yes.
It's no longer our family's house.
Yes. I think that's just so wonderful. That just sparks so much interest. You don't hear about things like that. You don't even hear about the horrors that happen so much, unfortunately. I mean, I realize nobody wants to dwell on these things, but we need to look at them. So.
Well, it's happening. It's happening with Thomas Jefferson's house. It's happening around.
It is.
But in terms of Alabama and in terms of our area, this is a first. Yeah.
Wow.
And so it's really important, the reconciliation and the support we've gotten for it.
Yes. And that's been what's been behind your work in general, the art pieces that you're creating, which I'm just now seeing here, the collages on the wall.
The collages are brand new. Now I'm working on the antebellum part of it. When I first started doing this was in 2012, I went to my 50th high school reunion in Birmingham. And I went to Ramsey High School. It was an all-white school. And by the time I got back 50 years later, it was an all-black school. I went to meet with the art teacher. And that it was an aha for me. So a few years later, I started working on Birmingham and working on the civil rights era. I had left before the Birmingham summer with the bombing of the 16th Street Church and everything. So I hadn't experienced it directly, and somehow I denied it. I mean, it just wasn't part of me. I wasn't emotionally attached to that because I left Birmingham never to return. That was my response.
Yeah.
And so that experience sort of prompted in me turning to embrace, the past that I had and try to come to terms with it. So those found plates, a lot of them were about Birmingham. And a lot of them were, using archival footage of the Birmingham civil rights part. And in my part, my growing up there, so I had family pictures in that too. And I was in the block program of the LaSalle
Yes.
for 2 years, and that was the first year, and I kept getting feedback about appropriation. And so I was appropriating other people's pain. This wasn't my thing. What was I doing? I grew up there.
Yeah.
I had the age, I had the geography.
Yes.
I didn't have the race. It wasn't my experience.
Right.
And so I began to make plates that were two-sided, what I saw and what I didn't see.
Okay. Okay.
And I did that, and that's when the Jim Crow chocolates are of that era. That's
Yes.
that's when they began.
Okay.
But in working through, what story is mine to tell? I mean, this took a couple of years. What story
Yes.
is mine to tell? I realized the story that's mine to tell is this antebellum story, and the story of our side of slavery.
Yeah.
And so I'd grown up with all this white guilt, and I think that's part of the psychological process that kept me from looking at it. And then I read an article that in the New York Times by Eula Biss that said, think about it as debt. It's white debt. It's something that you can repay.
Wow, that is.
And that shifted my frame totally.
Yeah.
And then I was interested in going back to Klein is the name of the house. So I go back to Klein.
Yeah.
And I was going to do an art installation there, and I'd asked my cousin who owned it if I could do that. And then the next thing I knew, he had died and left it to me.
Wow.
Yeah. And so that was, oh no, what do I do with this?
Whoops.
Because it's been vacant for like 40 years.
Oh my
it's
gosh,
in deteriorated
yes.
condition. We've done a year of stabilization on it.
Yeah.
We ended up getting a wonderful contractor and 2 men who had grown up in the area.
Wonderful.
And the contractor, he calls himself a practical preservationist. And we call what we're doing preservation with a purpose.
Yeah.
And so it's not just about the preservation. It's not just about, we want to keep it as true as possible to what was there. And towards that end, we aren't installing any creature comforts. It doesn't have plumbing. It has rudimentary electricity. It doesn't have heating and air conditioning.
I see. Okay.
And the walls have a beautiful patina of,
Yes.
layers and layers. So we're going to that. And then our long-term goal is to maybe do writers or artist residencies and to have outbuildings that are for that. But meanwhile, it's really a venue. It's a venue for art installation. It's a venue for conversation. It's a venue. It's going to be a venue for dance in January, which is our most exciting thing.
That is exciting.
And so to date, we've had 2 homecomings of the Black and White descendants. And the first homecoming, we weren't sure what it was going to be like, and it was co-planned by me and the vice president of the Klein Arts and Culture board, I knew his grandfather. So on the plate that used to be back there was a picture of his grandfather holding my cousin when he was,
okay.
was
We'll
little.
frame that in
Yeah. So Theo and I did it, and we didn't know who would come. They were the people on the board were carefully, I think, curating who would be invited, who would come, who would be open to this experience. And but we had about 40 people. And we met we have a cemetery that half of it is African American and half of it is white. So it's the descendants of those who were enslaved and my family descendants.
Yes.
So we were there to rededicate the black cemetery because my family had closed out to burial.
I read that.
And so it was a profound moment. And the moment where we gave the key, my cousin, who is the cemetery trust person, handed the key over to one of the descendants whose son is actually buried in the place. And then after that, closed down. So that was like the most powerful moment in the
Oh
world
my gosh,
for me.
yes.
Yeah. But we sang Amazing Grace, we did all kinds of
God.
stuff, and we had a facilitator from Birmingham, who's a civil rights facilitator, was out to work, help us plan it and work on it. And then we went from the cemetery to the house and had a facilitated discussion that this woman led, and then we had barbecue on the place.
Great.
So that was number 1, and we had number 2 just 2 weeks ago.
Just got back from
Just
that.
got back from that, right? And that one, we added some things. So this time, We had smudging to start, sage smudging.
Wonderful.
Walking around the circle because, of course, it's on creek land.
That's an interesting thing too.
And,
Going back.
Yeah, so there's so many things to fold into this. If you get me started, I'll begin to give you layers and layers of it. But so the creek land, and we also had some a family. They were, I think, 8 children, and 2 or 3 of the sisters made a wreath of flowers, local flowers, that were placed by this wonderful man, Mr. Henry Smith, in honor of the unnamed graves that were there of enslaved people and those that were around the county that we don't even know about.
Yeah.
And so so we have 2 new sort of institutions for our future ones. And we had singing and a lot of prayers.
It's a wonderful thing. I'm just reading that. I read about that and I was feeling emotional, honestly, because I think it's got to be such a healing force for the community, and that you're instigating that and then making it like a cultural art center, community.
Well, I think art is the way art brings healing.
Absolutely.
And it's also a way of not being literal.
Yes.
But bringing the emotion and the actual thought, to it as well. But it's
very poignant. It was a cotton plantation, correct?
Well, as you can see, there's cotton everywhere there. But
yes.
And I was just there, and they haven't picked all the cotton. And every time I go there, I'm just like amazed. There'll be people's houses in the middle of cotton fields. It's all about cotton. Yeah. And you drive down the road, and it's just like white snow everywhere. And,
oh my gosh! But talk about this map a little bit. You were telling me about that
it's topographical. I think that's what you call it in math. It's not done to scale.
Yes.
So it's a map from my memory. It starts from the house, which is Klein, which is right up there. And I was there every summer during the 50s in my childhood with my grandmother. And nobody lived there, but my grandmother and I would go there every summer. And so I had memories of being out in the backyard, covering myself with the red clay. I had a friend who played with me every summer, who was a descendant of the kind of house down the road.
Yeah.
And so she and I played every summer, and every day of every summer we went to Logan's Creek, which is the other end of that, to go swimming. And that's how we kept clean, because of course there's no running water.
Yes.
And so every day it was Logan's Creek. And Logan's Creek was also the place where I was baptized, and she was baptized.
Wow.
And so the plate on the wall over there is Logan's Creek Sunday afternoon.
Okay. All
and
right.
that's a picture of the baptism.
Yes.
So Mary is my childhood friend. I met her again this past year after 60 years of not seeing her.
Oh my gosh.
We immediately, got back, and so every time I go, we go to eat meat too.
60 years together.
Yeah. And so and her mother played the piano at the Klein Baptist Church, and the minister worked in Childersburg at a factory by day, and he was the minister. And it's in the middle of a cotton field. It's like
surrounded by cotton everywhere.
It's cotton everywhere. And so here's Klein. In the back is what was the root cellar, the antebellum root cellar is here. And then built on top of it, I'm not sure when, is what I'm calling the Jim Crow addition. And it's a galvanized metal building that has a door and 1 window. And I call it the John Mallory House. And he was our caretaker for the house. And he had worked on the railroad his entire life, African American.
Oh, wow.
Came back, a descendant most likely of the Mallorys who were up there.
Yeah.
And this is a barn that we had found that may be a Wallace barn, like 4 or 5 miles away. And that's just a 3 weeks old discovery. I mean, it's continually unfolding. And that's where Dan the horse lived. And the garden. And the apple trees. My grandmother used to say when I'd have friends out from the city, apple pie or apple pie.
Oh, yeah.
That's what we had. And
the
swamp down here. And the swamp used to be oily on top, so I wrote oil slick. We would surely strike oil. And so my grandmother said that that her sisters-in-law would always say, you know, there's going to be oil there. But unfortunately, no. No. So that's like the swamp, and then it goes to cotton on both sides.
I'm glad you
stories.
went to talk about it. It brings me to some of your pieces. The long cylinder ceramic. You're kind of a ceramicist. You are a ceramicist, actually.
Right. That's my primary training, I guess, is in ceramics, and I graduated from the Glassell in ceramics.
Yes.
But I've never seen a medium that I didn't want to try.
Well, that's true artist.
Yeah. So first it started with anything that would be in a kiln, and so I've done glass and ceramics, and I did. What I was doing before I started doing this work was sort of large coral cactus pieces that had glass elements mixed in with the ceramic. And
possibly I've seen some of those.
Yeah, but I showed them a long time ago, and then my first year in the block, after about 3 weeks, I was told to take them home because I needed to work on this other work, and that was great advice.
Okay.
Yeah. So at every point there's sort of been a great advice, you know, that has shifted me a certain way.
Yeah.
So I really, talking with people is something that's really key.
And feedback.
Yeah.
Well, also then, that speaking of Glassell, or actually the blog program, the show at Glassell this year that you were part of, that was an impressive arrangement or installation of your work. One piece in particular, the one on the wall that with are these grapevines? Or
kudzu vines. Kudzu.
Oh yes.
It's kudzu, which I use as a metaphor for obscuring and suffocating. So I did a lot of stuff with kudzu. I have a broken doll there that's got green crocheted around it of kudzu suffocating the doll. And my story along that line is I was having a studio visit with an artist who's African-American, mixed race, African-American, and she told me, well, it's my metaphor too, it's my metaphor for whiteness.
And that's really
and so
strong.
that is very strong, and that's
very
and so that the kudzu covers everything. You know, in the South, there's kudzu at our cemetery. There's kudzu, you know, wherever you look, there's kudzu there. And so the kudzu basket was made by a craftsman in Alabama, and then I torched it and put a Dorothea Lange picture inside, cotton workers.
That's great. And in the center, you've got the ceramic plate that you've made.
And that's raku ceramic. That's
broken.
You know, that's the glaze is broken.
Very lovely.
So on. And then the bowl underneath it, I call ritual vessel. And at the Glassell had been sitting on bricks that had been broken. And those bricks were from Klein. And so they had been made by the enslaved people on the place. And I also crushed some of the brick and incorporated it into a black clay that I made that vessel with.
Oh my gosh.
So working on that was a really emotional experience because you can feel the brick, and I was working with it just like they worked with it to make clay, to make the bricks. I was working with it to make the bowl.
Oh my gosh.
So
you must have gone through a series of emotions during this process.
It uncovers all kinds of things as you do it. Yeah.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you about, these sort of cylinder forms or vessels, if you call them, because I did read that you had the clay from the bricks in those as well.
The clay, no, that's the clay. It's
different?
only in there.
It's only in this.
This is just regular
clay.
Yeah, regular clay. It's actually paper clay to hold up well, but it has pictures from the first homecoming. They're images. So this is photolithograph, the green part on it. And so they're images from the homecoming, which are our reconciliation images, and then images from different family pictures, both of the African American families and of my family. And then those leaves are kudzu leaves that I harvested at the cemetery and brought back and stuck into water with chlorine in it to get the cellulose out. And so it just had the veins, and then I photographed them, and those are sepia decals that you make, and they're fired in too. So that's the origin of those. So that was sort of the reconciliation piece that, over against these two separate
Yeah.
you know,
Yes.
identities that you see at the top.
Yes.
There are people together at
Yes.
the bottom.
Very
So
strong.
that's the story of those, and that's where I got into printing. So
Oh,
I was
yes,
printing these
okay.
photolithographs, and so that's my current enthusiasm.
Your current thing. Well, actually, did you incorporate printing with these collages? Yes.
No, that's just handwriting.
Handwriting, okay,
There's
okay.
no printing, but I've been taking printing workshops, and I have done some prints.
Yeah, yeah.
But they're none of them up here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, talk about these collages.
These collages. So the collages are all, I call them palimpsests. You know, they're layers of meaning
Yes.
and layers of narrative, and I could talk about any of them. So there are two basic large images that go through that, and one is my great grandmother's. It's called the Kate Henderson Wallace book, my great grandmother's book, and I'll go right now. You can't see it. So the one that says Sunday School on it. So, and there are also some that have Robert E. Lee on it. And she had a ledger of her father's, who was an Alabama minister who helped start the Southern Baptist, the Journal, whatever it's called, the Alabama Baptist.
Okay.
It was called the Southwestern Baptist at that time. And so it was his journal, so it's all about, he's got his notes for sermons and his reading of different things. He turned out, and I only discovered this a few months ago, that he was a rabid secessionist, and he was part of the first secession convention.
Wow.
And he used the Southwestern Baptist Journal as a vehicle. He did both theology in it, and he did a lot of stuff for the Confederate cause, and that the Union soldiers shut it down.
Oh, what time period are we
That
talking?
was new. We're in the 1860s.
Oh, okay, I was going to say.
Yeah. So this journal is very old.
Yeah.
And so it came to me, wrapped in muslin. I'd heard about it, and I tracked it down and where it was, and so now it's in my possession.
Oh, wow.
And so I digitized it, and so I'm going to be doing prints using that as a layer, of them. So it's a layer of the collages. So these collages are on the way to informing prints.
Yeah.
And so they have that is underlying it. And then there's wallpaper from Klein, from the house, that you can see in a lot of them. And they're, the buildings. They're another theme is Birth of a Nation. So, and the one that says fraught, complicated, privileged heritage. On the right-hand side, there is a scene from Birth of a Nation, and the male lead is my grandfather's first cousin, who grew up in the place, who was educated by my great-grandmother. And that, of course, led to the rebirth of the Ku Klux Klan, which the modern Klan started in Harpersville.
Oh, my God.
With and with inspiration from Birth of a Nation. And they held the first meeting in Stone Mountain, Georgia, but it was of a man who grew up in Harpersville and was inspired by that. So there's just layer after layer on this. And it's inescapable. It's just totally inescapable. And I have my grandchildren in that same picture. So it's about the legacy, and that's and they're at the cemetery at the reunion. And there's cotton. The other thing that runs through all of those are cotton fields.
I mean, when you think about it, do you feel like your ancestors are playing a part in driving you to some degree?
Oh, I do think so, yeah. No, I do think so.
And maybe not even just your ancestors, but
a lot of ancestors. I think there's a lot of energy behind this, which I had never imagined.
Yeah.
And there's energy around the house project. It feels like a vortex that just sort of sucks things in. Yeah, so it's wild.
Because if you think about it, just all the bad energy that was created over the years, that kind of thing that, most of us being white, growing up white and not in the South, but my mother's from the South. So when you talk about some of these things, we would go back periodically. She was from Virginia. So I can relate to some of this, although it was very much not a part of my life. I grew up north, but still there was segregation everywhere. and I grew up in a bubble, really.
Oh, we're all in bubbles. We continue to be in
Still
bubbles.
continue to be, but you know, that this just feels so healthy. We need to really look at our history, and even if it's more personal, like in your case, or less personal, where it just becomes history and we need to see that. I think otherwise we just can't heal this thing. I don't know if we will ever reach that point where it feels like, wow, we've done that now, it's over.
I don't know. We have our small sphere of influence, and that's what we're working in.
Yeah.
And we've been really fortunate. Ms. Georgette Norman was the founding director of the Rosa Parks Museum, and she's been working with us on oral histories of descendants, and she's also doing it to the board members because we got to do that.
That would be fascinating.
And we're going to have a history room when we figure, we've got to bring resources to it, but have an interactive history room that, kids can contribute to too, that they can do interviews with their grandparents, and that we'll have a way to get the stories out and told.
It'll be really interesting to see how this continues to unfold and probably just help bring a community together that's been so broken for so many reasons. And I just am so excited to know you're doing this. And I know it's not Houston, but Houston has its set of crazy, terrible history too. And every once in a while you hear about it, or find bodies of slaves.
Houston was in the South,
It's the South.
It was still in the Confederacy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I've been honored to know you, meet you, and see what you're doing. And
well, I think that, talking about art and the
Yes,
house,
yes.
one of the things that we want to do is have this be an arts venue.
yes.
And we were so fortunate because the Alabama Dance Festival is being held at Klein in January, and it's because they were closed out of an antebellum house in Birmingham. And
really?
Yeah, and they came to us.
Meant
and
to be.
It's the Wideman Davis Dance Company who had gotten a grant to bring the embodied Black presence into empty antebellum homes, and they've done it in Columbia, South Carolina. They're going to be doing it in Louisiana, and they're doing it in Alabama with us. And that is totally powerful.
Oh my gosh.
It's amazing. And they're...
Because dance is already, it's so expressive and it can be emotional even when you don't know what they're expressing. But this, I can only imagine how...
And the dancers say they go into a space, when they're doing it. And one of them is the male lead is... his name is Thaddeus Davis, and he's from Montgomery. And close, yes, contextualizing. So the little dolls, that's called Eyes Averted. Those are my childhood dolls.
Oh, really?
And the white doll is looking away because the white doll can't look at it.
Yes.
Just can't.
Gosh, that's
Yeah.
I wondered where you got those. Those were actually your dolls.
Yeah.
Wow.
I actually have one of those dolls that, is white this way and you pull them down and it's black. But that was my doll too.
Oh, yeah.
My mother kept everything.
There's a whole sect of people that believe dolls, that souls slip into dolls sometimes. Some people are creeped out by it, but those are, knowing they were yours is just...
So they sort of sit there in the studio watching me when I work.
Yeah, they're keeping an eye on you, just making sure you're... That's great. Just, I want to thank you very much for allowing me to come in here and see what you're doing and share this with the community. I think it's valuable stuff. And not only that, it's beautiful the way you present it through your work. It's pleasing to look at, and it really pulls you in. I really feel strongly about your work, so I'm excited, and thank you.
Well, thank you, Kay. This was a wonderful experience. I love that conversation.
Oh, good. Wonderful. And of course, we'll say goodbye to the viewers.
Bye.
Thank you for watching.